All right, welcome everyone. Welcome. Wonderful to have you all here today. Not sure where everyone is joining us from, but we are coming, or I am coming to you from beautiful Costa Rica. My name is Hannah, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on regenerative leadership today. Before I pass it off to your official host for the session, I wanted to jump in and give you all, for any of you who are not familiar with the University for Peace or the Center for Executive Education, give you just a brief overview of who we are and what we do. If you are able during this session, we are planning for it to be quite interactive. So if you can, if you're in a place to do so, to turn on your camera, be able to come off mute whenever you'd like. And we'll also be using the chat box as well. So again, if you can turn on the camera, fantastic. And if you can't, completely understand. Welcome, welcome everyone as you trickle in. I'm going to start with a quick overview, and I am going to share my screen here. Let's see. Sorry, guys. All right. If you could give me a thumbs up when you can see it, that would be excellent. Excellent. Great. So some of you may have heard this before, maybe it's repeat information, but for those of you who haven't, we are based within the University for Peace, which is a very, I know when I first heard University for Peace, I thought, does that really exist, a University for Peace? And indeed it does. It is a very unique, magical institution based in Costa Rica. We were established in 1980 by the United Nations General Assembly, and we work very, very heavily under the United Nations mission to create a more peaceful, more tolerant world. At that time, it was the height of the Cold War, and there really was just a need for an institution of higher education that was completely and totally dedicated to peace and conflict studies. So we currently host about 150 students from all over the world for different master's programs. They're here for 1 year, and then they go back to their home countries and hopefully can implement some of what they've learned. We have master's programs in 3 different departments, one in peace and conflict. This is our largest department, one in environment, and one in international law. And like I said, we work basically under the United Nations mission to help try to address some of society's biggest issues, climate change, poverty, inequality, human rights violations, and many others, of course. Within the University for Peace, we are coming to you today from the UP Center for Executive Education. So we are a small organization within the university that works under that same mission, but localizes it a little bit. So our understanding is that everyone has the ability and the potential to make a difference and have a positive impact in this world. You don't have to have a master's program from the University for Peace to do this. You don't have to be, a CEO or head of an organization in order to do this. Anyone at any level of their professional career can decide and can have that desire to have a positive impact. And at the UP Center for Executive Education, our goal is to be able to provide students and participants with the skills, networks, and mindsets to really be able to act on however they want to have positive impact, whether it's within your family, within your team, within your group of coworkers, or within your community at large. So this is exactly where we're coming from. And actually, this is a perfect segue into our session today with Dr. John Hardman. Before we actually kick off, I wanted to do a brief introduction. John needs no introduction, but he has a fantastic background. He is a faculty member in the Department of Educational Leadership and Research Methodology at Florida Atlantic University. And he's also the founder of Regenerative Organizations. It's a company dedicated to providing consulting and coaching to leaders who want to engage in conscious and purposeful transformation of their organizations. He's conducted extensive research in the field of regenerative leadership, including authoring a book on the topic, and he also consults for a slew of corporations, nonprofits, universities, and schools as well. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Dr. John Hardman. Thanks, John.
Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everybody, according to where you are. I actually think I'm seeing somebody I know. Is that Michael Carson by any chance? From Florida?
Hi, John. How are you?
Wow, well, terrific to have you here. So
Yeah,
great
I
to see
really
you.
came to just hang out with you.
Well, wonderful to have you and everybody else here from so many different parts of the world. Uh, I've been doing this work now for several years here at UPeace, but I am now in Western Massachusetts, even though I continue to work full-time at Florida Atlantic University in Florida and other things around the place. But one of my real passions is this particular work here with UPeace, where I can actually do the work that I've actually built up over the years in terms of my research and consulting and working with in Florida with the United States Green Building Council, where some people like Michael, I think, we actually connected. So wonderful to have you. And we're just going to start with a quick question for you all in the chat. So since we have so many people, we don't want to get everybody talking and just take up all the time. Before we get into sort of the overview of the course, why don't you put in the chat, and some of you have already done that, where you're from, and maybe one positive thing that you've taken away from the pandemic. I think it's a time for us to share the good stuff of the pandemic and see how that has helped us rather than taking us down. So just your name, where you are, and something you've taken away as positive from the pandemic. And then we can share that. Self-growth from Peter in South Africa. Quality time with family, becoming resilient, to dream a bit more. Fantastic. Nairobi, San Jose, Costa Rica, Calgary, Alberta, new connections, Boston. All right, a fully functioning home office, well, global outreach, absolutely. That's something I've learned too. Connecting with different people in the world, more time with family, to get creative, time to focus without distraction. Wow, we've got somebody from Palestine, remarkable. Connect with more people, more compassion. Become more aware of others in spite of the fact that we're not in the same room together. So really connecting, and that's one of the things we attempt to do here through this work, is to see how we can create real relationships and connect emotionally, not just intellectually. So some of the activities we'll be doing through the course and through the diploma programs that Hannah can talk to you about are also intended to create these networks of people where you can strengthen your work and strengthen your impact. More people from Costa Rica to become more locally resilient and sustainable. This is part of the work we'll be doing here. Complete your master's degree online. Good for you. Spend more time with family and pets. Joseph from Kenya, peaceful world home. Fantastic. Hoping to learn new things. Well, that's what we'll be getting into. Etc., etc. So a wonderful introduction here, a bit of an icebreaker just to see the variety of people who are joining us who might be interested in following the program, whether it's this course individually as a standalone or as part of that larger diploma program. So Hannah, how many courses are there in a diploma program? Which are they?
So we do offer larger diploma programs that actually consist of 5 different courses. And John, what you'll be doing today is talking specifically about one individual course, but it can be part of a larger journey.
And the 2 diplomas are global leadership and positive leadership?
Yes, we have 2 diploma tracks. One is a diploma in global leadership, and the other is a diploma in social innovation, depending on where your interest lies.
Right. So let me just go through some of the details of the course, but I wanted to start with a question. So here are the 2 big questions that we'll be addressing in this particular course, and obviously in all of the program, in all of the diplomas, but these are the big questions. One is, we're all trying to create an impact, and have an influence and shape our reality both locally and further afield. And that, of course, is a choice of each and every one of you, wherever you are. If you're in the for-profit, the non-profit sector, an NGO, whether you're in government, in a municipality, a teacher, a professor. So if you're in education and industry, agriculture, the regenerative leadership framework actually is compatible and correlates, because of my research, with any field of the human endeavor activity. And many of you will have a very good idea of what you're doing, what you'd like to do, or how you'd like to grow your leadership, grow your impact. It's not quite so clear how to do that, particularly today, getting beyond the pandemic. How do we create a world that's on the, getting to that point of no return? How do we turn back those challenges and actually address them locally to begin with, in order then to create real solutions using real strategies that are research-based and not just a matter of personality or character or what I grew up knowing? Clearly, things are not working as well as they could be. Whether you are the Secretary General of the United Nations, the president of a country, or somebody who runs a small NGO somewhere in the backwoods of a country and trying to make some good happen for people locally who are suffering, struggling, or are in need of support. So at whatever level you are, there are leadership frameworks, strategies, skills, and tools that you can learn and incorporate that can actually help you accomplish. And in the work that I do, and what I found in my research, is the question we ask is, you may be familiar, of course, with the triple bottom line. And for some reason, sustainability professionals get burned out trying to follow and satisfy the triple bottom line, because they run the numbers and they collect the data on energy conservation and social impact, and they continually feel they're behind the 8 ball because they never really get as far as they could. So the proposal here is something slightly different. We're proposing the triple top line, which is more aspirational, which is actually contained in this question: how can we grow prosperity, celebrate community, and enhance the health of all species for all time? Which takes us out of the sort of the rational mindset of that linear model of doing things, which does not seem to have really solved our problems locally or globally. And the answer, the question I have is, why is that happening? Why aren't we really addressing and solving these problems? And the big mistake, or the big blind spot, as Otto Scharmer would call it, that we find is that people are looking in the wrong place for the solutions. And many of us are aware and understand intuitively where that issue is. But then we don't act on it. And so the answer is, there is something here that needs to be looked at, that if we don't focus on that. Hello and welcome. If you could mute yourself, that'd be great. The first step in actually becoming regenerative is we need to redefine who we are first. The whole notion of why we're not solving the problem, because everybody can identify the problems, like pollution or poverty, and the list that Hannah went through, which is the same old list of since time began and people oppressed each other. There seems to be an understanding of the problems, but not of where the solutions lie. And the solution lies not in the problem, which is a symptom of something else. The problem, of course, is not the whales or the birds or the bees or the parrots, or it's us. It is a human problem. And that human problem can only be found at the root of who we are. And that, of course, is in our own consciousness. And until we focus back on consciousness and take a look at ourselves, we're not going to create and design or redesign what we do in ways that will make the solutions possible. So this is a very simple equation. And it goes back to, who we really are first before we can actually meet up with somebody else. And that's why in the framework, the first thing we focus on, as we've been seeing with people like Simon Sinek and so many people who are out there, about getting back to the why. Why do we want to do this? What drives us? Why are we passionate about something? And what can we do about it? And that's the work of regenerative leaders and their organizations. And this course actually helps us. Well, my proposal here is to do a deep dive into who we are and to look at those aspects of ourselves that will really build our effectiveness and our impact out there as we get to work on the work that we want to do. So my work is not to tell you what to do. My work is to help you design the how, the process. So everything that you'll be doing in the course, which could be and certainly will be aligned in some way or another to the 16 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, connected to the 17th goal, which is how do we all come together in partnership? How do we bring together the energy of different consciousnesses in a way that we can create this groundswell of solution that can address challenges in a way that's positive, creative, and intelligent. And so these are some of the course outcomes that we are proposing here. I won't read them, you can read them for yourself. But the idea is to begin with you first, and then to get into projects. So there are two major deliverables for the course if you want to have the certificate. And we do have the course text, which is my publication, which I will give you for free. But all the materials and the videos that you'll have the weekly presentations that will actually give you most of the information you need. But then if you want to get into the readings, that will be helpful as well. So as you can see, there are two major assignments required for the certificate. One is I'll take you through a questionnaire where you actually identify your strengths and areas for growth as a sustainability or regenerative change agent, and you'll create a table with some goals for yourself. And the other deliverable is a project where I will give you a template that all you need to do is what I call it paint by numbers. You tell us what you want to do, and then I will give you some of the tools and frameworks of how to develop the skills and the design of that project involving your stakeholders, using the framework and other leadership tools and frameworks to make sure that you are designing a prototype that's going to really address all the unanticipated possible consequences of the implementation you have planned, whether it's environmentally, socially, economically, or more importantly, we address all of these three, which of course are the legs of the stool of sustainability, as components of well-being. So when we talk about well-being, whether it's planetary, socially, economically, or mental or emotional health, which is an important topic these days for people, how do you incorporate the environment, the society, and the economy into your project in such a way that these are real, viable elements that really drive the project? And we have 4 weekly modules. So we have 4 modules for the whole of the course. And I believe, Hannah, that every course is based on a 4-week model. And you'll be asked and required to actually post on the forum, because the weekly live sessions, of course, are an opportunity for us to interact together and where we can have conversations. Not everybody can, because of their time commitments, actually participate in the live session, but these will be recorded and will be shared with you. So the only other option is for you to participate in the weekly forum, where you actually post what you are reflecting on, some aspects of your work, you ask questions, and you can read the work of others and provide feedback or suggestions and begin to build that network. So these are the reasons why we require you to participate in the forum, so you do get closer to the group, closer to UPs, and get to know people and get other people to get to know you. There's also the option for a weekly reflective journal, which only I see. So if you really want to get deeper into yourself and into your work, that is shared with me, and I provide feedback to that. I do the same with the main assignments, where you can send these to me, and I'll ask you to email them to me, and I'll provide feedback as we go along the 4 weeks. And the solution project, I actually give you 2 weeks after the end of the course to really pull that together and create a draft of something that you will be proud of. My requirement is not that you actually do the project, implement it, and show results, but that you have a good prototype, because you won't have time in the time that we're together to actually implement too much, but to actually submit to me and for my review and then to share with others the work that you're doing, wherever you're doing it, and how you want to accomplish it. That's where I will go deeper with you into the work that you want to do. So just to recap, here are the course logistics. So the dates of the course are from July 12th to August the 7th. There are the 4 modules, and in a second I'll show you what those look like. And we have every Friday, we have a 90-minute interactive session like this, where obviously there'll be fewer people than there are on Zoom right now. So that gives an opportunity for us to get into breakout rooms, for you to work in small groups together to share what you're doing and how you're doing it, get feedback. We'll be working on some topics based on the readings. And of course, I'll be presenting the Regenerative Leadership Framework in depth so that we can discuss primarily the leadership qualities and then the skills of individual regenerative leaders, and then how they work most effectively in their organizations, whether they are in a for-profit corporation, a business, or an NGO, or whether they're working in a town council, or in a school, or a university. So whatever your project might be and your field, we will take a look at how the framework, in this case, regenerative leadership, and then other leadership frameworks that are deeply important today, such as adaptive leadership, or the work of Frederick Laloux and Teal organizations, how new organizations are actually coming together and collaborating in ways that are totally breaking away from the convention and traditional ways of leading and managing organizations. So hopefully all of these together will help you take a look at what you're doing and build on what you're doing well, and then improving where you see some gaps or some areas for improvement, and making sure that you are creating something that will last for 200 years with less than 0 negative impact. So how do we become carbon negative? How do we have 0 waste? How do we generate prosperity? And how do we enrich the health of all the species around us in ways that are positive and resilient and long-lasting? So finally, going back to Hannah, if you have any questions, of course, you should contact her, and she's always available to answer questions with regard to the diploma programs, the work that we do, and in some cases, there are funding opportunities, scholarships. So there's always information to be had through the office, either with Hannah or Esmeralda Bolaños, who also worked with her. So Hannah, anything you'd like to add at this point?
This is excuse me. This is perfect, John. Thank you. Like you said, please get in touch with me. You can throw me a message in the chat box. I'll be following up with you after the session as well to make sure you have all of the materials and information if you do want to get involved in the larger regenerative leadership course as well.
Let me just show you. If anybody has a question, please, this is time to ask it. Meantime, I'll show you the course pages. So here's the, let me get rid of this line. Here's the course overview, and I've covered much of this information already, but you see there's 4 modules, the final project, and everything is laid out for you with readings, video recordings of the materials, and then additional readings each week. So as we get into each week, you will see a number of materials that we will be working on, and then suggested additional readings that you can get into. And then you have the different assignments and all of these different links, which I try to keep as current as possible to make sure we really are working towards the most recent developments in, obviously, the sustainable development goals of the UN and projects. And I can show you, for example, with regard to some of the projects. Here's a project, some projects that were submitted for the course. So here's a very recent one about mental health. And in Trinidad and Tobago, one of the biggest partners, I think, for UPs at the moment, but we have quite a number of participants. And this is one that has to do with developing an approach to mental health, particularly at this time, and creating an organization that actually uses the regenerative leadership framework in order to promote mental health. But there are a number of others. There are people working with homelessness. Here, I come from Argentina, so I'm bilingual. If your work is in Spanish, you can certainly do all of your written work in Spanish, and I'll be glad to talk to you in Spanish. And here is an issue in Honduras with houselessness or homelessness of 14 to 24-year-olds, and a whole approach to that work. Then I have another one. So there's all sorts of projects here. Organic coffee plantation in Costa Rica itself, a family coffee plantation that they want to change over into a totally organic and an ecotourism project. Here's a very ambitious project of actually bringing together women in Europe to create this female grail in Europe, to create this network of women who are working for sustainability and human rights across Europe and then further afield. There are all sorts of different kinds of projects that, whatever it is that you want to do or really feel passionate about, the work I do is to support the design of how you engage your stakeholders, how you engage in conversation, how you work on generating real collaboration, how you do your research. Because I'm a researcher, if rather than doing an actual project, you'd like to do a field study of some sort, I can help you design an approach to conducting research. So that's also an option. So hopefully that answers some of your questions that you might be thinking of. And if I get back to, if you haven't seen it already, here's my website. And the framework that we'll be getting into is this. And obviously, there's not time now to go through this at this time. And this is based on my research in corporations, in government. So leaders of people who have really been leading organizations in the for and not-for-profit sector. And the leadership framework is actually a correlation of everything that I found that is common to these effective leaders who are taking their organizations into the 21st century and beyond.
John, I have a question that maybe others will have, so I'll
Sure, absolutely.
the group. I think some people perhaps in this room are coming very new to the subject of regenerative leadership and the understanding, perhaps you can clarify, between sustainability and sustainable development and regenerative leadership. Can you explain perhaps the difference or the overlap there?
That's one of the things that we go into in the course in depth. Actually, the first module is about differentiating or defining sustainability, sustainable development, and regeneration. The simplest definition I take from Alan Atkinson, that some of you may be familiar with, and he calls sustainability the end point. This is where we want to get to, and sustainable development, the process to get there. So that's the simplest definition in terms of distinction. Regeneration actually is the response to the burnout of these terms of sustainability and sustainable development. And this goes back to somebody else that I actually interviewed in my research, saying, why are people just getting so fed up with the buzzword sustainability? Well, think about it like this. If you ask a couple who've been married for a long time, for 40 years, how are you doing? Well, we're great, we're sustainable. How excited do you get about that sort of long-term, difficult sometimes state of stability which is being sustainable. So that really is it's very hard to get people excited and passionate about that. So regeneration comes as a response of going beyond this notion of this very difficult target in the future to build on what can we do right now to actually redefine ourselves and then redesign everything that we do from the premise that every human organization on the planet today is obsolete. There may be some things that we're willing to keep, but if we really do a deep dive into what brings us together, into our organizations together today, in order to do good work, there's no doubt there are organizations that do good work, but there seems to be an underlying problem that is not allowing us to liberate ourselves from the thinking of the past in order to come up with real solutions to the challenges of the present. And that requires stepping away from everything that we think we know, at least to have the willingness to step away and say, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board, because we have all these wonderful things that technology has brought us, but it's also brought us to this point of saturation of the planet's resources where we no longer can feed everybody. We can no longer take everybody out of poverty. And we can't help people get themselves out of poverty unless we find new ways of doing it. And regenerative leadership is one of those propositions of, well, I realize that my mission is no longer I empower people to do things. I can only provide people things or tools or skills for them to empower themselves. But I'm finding that it is quite arrogant to believe that we can empower other people. Now, if I can help other people discover their own purpose and build on their own desires and their own aspirations and help them when they don't have enough of their own resources, and that's what Jeffrey Sachs calls below the bottom rung of poverty, people do need relief. They do need help. Beyond that, they need support in order to build themselves out of whatever hole they're in or to create that prosperity that we're talking about. So that's part of also, how do we, all of us here, you're here for a reason. What is it that you're here for? And how can we help you to become more of yourself and better? And that is the proposal, of course, in the Diploma program. And I'd say the United Nations, even with its own challenges and struggles, of how to impact on a global scale without taking over people's reality in their own context. So if you're in Kenya, or if you're in South Florida, or if you are in the Middle East or in the Far East, you have real challenges that are real in that context. And I cannot understand that context like you can. But there are things or principles that are universal, which have to do with how we connect with each other, how we talk with each other and not at each other, and how we can actually work together to make a difference. And these are the kinds of questions that we'll be asking and hopefully answering to some degree so that you can create that prototype of your model, your leadership style, your projects, wherever you are, whatever it is that you want to do.
Thank you, John. We do have one question in the chat box that says, how can this course be helpful for me as a physician in particular?
Oh, great. Okay. Well, the healthcare industry, we're going to get into it. I think one of the work with hospitals that I found very interesting has been the move away from a linear model of healthcare to a team approach. So I don't know if the person who's asking the question is actually engaged in a new approach based on what I would call the teal organization, where, for example, a patient comes into a healthcare unit and is received and served by the same team of people throughout their stay in that institution, rather than being handed off. They complete the form, they're received by somebody, then they're passed off to somebody else, then they're passed off to somebody else. And hospitals have a rule, which is you need to get everybody out of the bed within a week. After a week, a bed becomes non-profit. So the faster you get people out of the bed, the sooner you can get somebody else into bed, and obviously the most important costs are generated, or profits or benefits are generated at the beginning of that relationship. And one of the work I've done actually in our College of Medicine has been with extending the clinical internship or clerkship under the supervision of a mentor, a physician, into a third year of a relationship with a mentor, and really drilling down into the work of looking at the holistic approach to learning who the patient is rather than treating them as a unit, and really the recovery rate of patients who feel well treated and cared for and who become familiar with their healthcare givers actually get healthier much more quickly and more effectively. So I don't know if that answers the question, but there is an approach that seems to be taking off very strongly with regard to a much more holistic approach to working with patients.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So yeah, hopefully that did answer your question. Are there any other questions? Feel free to pop them into the chat box or come off mute and ask us here.
I'll stop share. So for those of you who don't have multiple screens, it's easy to see each other. All right, well, that's it in a nutshell. Hannah, anything else?
Maybe, John, another one that could be percolating in other people's minds, just to say to the group, that top triple line of species, conserving species for all time, community, and I would imagine that for some people, trying to address that statement in their own organization or in their own work might seem a bit overwhelming. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions as to things that could be done, or ways that it can be approached so that it doesn't seem so so large scale, if you want to have that impact but you're not really sure where to start?
This is a great question. This is one of the things we address in depth, because in the project there is a tendency where one of the things that we define, or I've defined in regenerative leadership, is the tendency to fall into a single bottom line, which is the for-profit corporation that only seeks profit, or the NGO that has a social mission, and so therefore they have a single bottom line, which is to save lives, or to have, create something where people are taken off the street. And it's very hard in those situations for people to actually think about, well, what are the environmental impacts that we need to be thinking about? This problem is so urgent, we can't worry about whether the transportation we use in the vehicles are actually run on gas or they're electric. I mean, give me a break. We can't think about it at this time. This is one of those fallacies of there are connections to the natural environment, to economics, and some nonprofits find it very hard to work with money. And therefore, they spend a lot of time fundraising, and this is certainly true of the USGBC, in terms of how do we get more members into the organization, get them to provide funding so that we can accomplish our mission. They spend 80% of their time fundraising and begging for scraps rather than becoming more aggressive and financially savvy about how to accomplish their mission, while considering that as they scale, if their project is successful, they're going to begin to have significant environmental impacts in waste generation, in consumption of energy, electricity, water, and all sorts of things in the buildings that they use. Are those buildings healthy? Do they have kids who are coming in, for example, in a situation of poverty, who have allergies, and therefore you bring them into buildings where they have respiratory problems because they have things, there are toxic elements in buildings. So it may be hard to consider or to see the environmental, economic, or social dimensions of your work when your work is not directly related to that. One of the things that we do in this course is actually, I'm going to require you to begin to think bigger. Well, ask yourself the question, what is relevant with regard to the natural environment in your work? I'm not asking you, I actually am working on a project where I asked somebody to do that. Oh, okay, well, instead of working with the YMCA, I'm going to go and do a beach cleanup. No, that's not the point. This is not the idea to go and do something environmental. What is relevant with regard to the environmental aspects of your work that you could consider? Because as I said earlier, is one of the things about this, the design here of the prototype, we're trying to get you to do something small now, not go mainstream, not scale up. We'll do that later. Now we want you to create a prototype which does not have unintended or unanticipated consequences down the road. When you scale up and suddenly you realize you have a nightmare scenario because you're producing toxic waste in the case of healthcare that you cannot dispose of, or you are creating buildings which are unhealthy for a large percentage of the population, and of course generating waste, or you are putting into your curriculum in a school things that have nothing to do with the 21st century. So I've done a lot of work with engineering schools with regard to what do we teach in engineering? And it's very hard for engineers to say, I can't take out one topic from the textbook in order to put in sustainability concept. I said, no, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to just work smarter. What are the environmental impacts of creating concrete in the traditional sense? What are the toxics or the binders in cement today that should no longer be there? How do you build smarter and differently? If you are in school education, what's in the curriculum? Are you teaching the same old things in order to get kids to pass the test? Or are you getting them to become critical thinkers in kindergarten and all the way through their K-12 career to think about their compassionate relationship with their environment? And what are they eating? What are you putting in the school cafeteria? So all of these are topics where I will ask you to think bigger and to see the system that you belong to. We will look at all the systems that we're all connected to and why they drive our behaviors in such a way that we feel trapped very often in complying with things we do not believe in because we need them or out of fear. If there's one thing that we need to do is to get the courage to actually push back against those systems that do not work for us or humanity or the natural environment, and to find ways not just to push back, but then to, as Buckminster Fuller would say, if you do not like the organization you're in and you can't do something about it, go away and create your own and allow that old organization to collapse on its own, because it will if it's obsolete. So the writing's on the wall for corporations, and many of them already know it. So you have companies, other companies like I've worked with, like Nike or Shell Oil, who are having to reconsider what their business model is. And Shell Oil, of course, the people I worked with in there actually were the creators of the polymers that created plastic, which cellophane back in the 1960s was a beautiful product that was designed to become something perfect that would last forever. And boy, they did a great job.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Thank you. There was another question that came in the chat box about other universities offering a course like this, but at less prices. What's the difference? John, I can take this one. Not sure which university or which course you're talking about, but our course, the Regenerative Leadership 4-week course, is priced at $595. Like John says, I think some of the things that set this course apart from other online courses, yeah, you can go to Coursera and go to a plethora of other options that are perhaps free or very low price. And I think what we are able to give you through a 4-week experience like this is a very strong network of people that you can meet, lean in with, create relationships with during the course. And the idea is that hopefully these relationships extend way beyond the 4 weeks themselves. John's expert feedback on everything that you send him. This is not something that you often get in courses that are free or something of this nature. He will look at every single assignment, single thing that you send his way with a very critical eye towards helping you have that impact that you want to have. And finally, giving you an implementable prototype, something that at the end of the 4 weeks, you can actually go forth and execute and implement. And of course, at the end of the certificate course, you'll also have a certificate from the United Nations Established University for Peace, which may go without saying, but it says a lot about who you are, about your character, and obviously adds a credential to your profile. So those are just some of the things that I think sets this course apart. Any
On the
other?
on the academic side, yes, there are master's degrees in sustainability. You've got Arizona State, or there are programs out there. And a new one has just been endowed in Stanford by John Doerr, who's a tech venture capitalist and angel investor. So there are all sorts of programs out there, but of course you'll be paying your $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for a master's degree. That may not be your interest at this time. The other thing I'd say about this program is that you're getting to meet people from around the world who are doing remarkable things, who might inspire you in different ways that you might not have anticipated. And that's why it's so important for us to really foster connection, that you can see what people are doing. You know, we've got people from South Africa, from the Far East, from the United States, from Central and South America, from all around the world. So it's interesting to see what people are doing, how they're doing it, and you will pick up some insights there on how you might actually bring these ideas into your own work. And there are things you might not have seen in your own backyard that are happening and are just as challenging or difficult as in what we'd call, the 40 poorest countries of the world as defined by the United Nations. And some of these are happening. I mean, in South Florida alone, we have got abuse and exploitation of migrant workers, and we've got homelessness, and we have all sorts of terrible things happening, as well as climate change and sea level rise, and I'm sure Michael Carson is aware of, which are all real challenges and require creative people who are passionate and willing to go that extra mile, to put in the time, get together with other like-minded people, and see how we can chip away at these issues and help people do it for themselves. Again, it's not us doing it for them. It's how can we help others really make a life for themselves that's worthwhile, where they can provide opportunities for their own kids to get access to healthcare and education, and obviously prosperity in one way or another, and what is real to their context, their belief systems, their culture, and their traditions.
Great. We have another question from Jacqueline around the framework itself. She says, how does the framework here differ or relate with the logic of life from Laura Storm? Not sure if you're familiar with that.
I know the name, but I wouldn't be in a position to say anything specific.
Okay.
This work, the model is actually based on the work of Ken Wilber and his AQAL, his all quadrants, all levels. So I work from the perspective of below the radar, below the horizon. We work on the internal consciousness of the individual and the collective, which is the organization. And above the horizon is working on our behaviors as individuals and as organization. So in the work that we do, we will be looking at both of these dimensions and then seeing where you are in terms of that self-assessment and your own questionnaire, and that action plan, which will help you build, develop some goals and some success indicators or key performance indicators for yourself as to what would it look like for you to be tremendously effective in those goals. What would you like to see yourself doing and how? So it's a simple exercise, but one that if you turn it into not an assignment for the teacher, if you turn it into a real thing that for yourself, this can help you over time to really build your own effectiveness.
Excellent. All right. Any other questions? I just asked, there was a question in the chat box around the live sessions, and if you can't make it, if it will be recorded, and the answer is yes. Specifically, this course does cover many people coming from many different time zones, so it is not obligatory to be at the live sessions, but I can't stress enough how valuable they are. So if you are able to attend them live and be able to engage and contribute your ideas, that's preferable. But if you cannot, they definitely will be recorded and posted to the Moodle learning website after the fact.
And with regard to that, we tend to try to accommodate people's timetables. So we alternate 2 sessions at 10 o'clock in the morning EST, and the other 2 sessions at 3 p.m. EST. And that serves, that's people can attend 1 or 2 at least, if not all. And then once we have the first live session, we have a conversation about the practicality of those times. I'm always flexible to see if there's a time an hour earlier or an hour later or something that would work for the greater number. But of course, that's only viable for those people who actually come to the session. But anybody who joins the course, they want to email me and say, look, it'd be great if we could meet at 9 o'clock at night, EST. If everybody agrees, well, that'd be fine. We can make that happen. So I'm always open to being flexible to accommodate the greatest number.
Great, great. Any other questions before we close out? Good. Chat box, nothing. All right. Well, maybe this is good, John. Thank you so much for joining us today, for hosting this session, and for all of you joining from wherever you are. Appreciate you taking the time out. I will definitely be in touch with some information on the course itself if you want to get started. It starts on July 12th, so it's still a few weeks away. But if you'd like to get started or just get in touch with John, that option is also there as well. John, thank you so much for joining us.
I'll be opening the course on the weekend before July 12th, so that people can get started, and then we'll run that the first live session on the Friday of that week, July 12th.
Perfect. Excellent. All right, everyone.
All right,
thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be in close touch. Thanks for
all the
joining
best.
us.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Take care. Bye, Michael.
Bye.
Pleasure to see you.